A crazy, crippled veteran who can't even walk straight. You really think you deserve this, kid? The words hit me like a slap. Before I could even blink, my own psychiatric file was hurled right at my face. Outside the consultation room, a barrage of camera shutters and blinding flashes tore through the glass, pinning me down. I sat frozen in my wheelchair, my arms locked around my 7-year-old daughter, Lily. She was shaking like a leaf. I did everything I could to shield her from the local tabloids crowding the windows, their lenses digging into our skin. The woman screaming was Lily's biological mother. She was wearing this flashy, oversized outfit that looked ridiculous on her, and she was laughing like a maniac. She pointed a manicured finger at the faint, jagged scars peeking out from my sleeve and shrieked to the social workers and mediators, calling me a psychopath. She claimed I was a ticking time bomb, dangerous to myself and to the child. Right on cue, my ears started ringing, that familiar, heavy buzz left behind by a roadside bomb years ago. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. All I could do was squeeze Lily tighter, burying her face into my chest to block out the horror. Just when it felt like the room was going to drown in her screaming and the relentless snap of the cameras, the heavy wooden door was thrown open. The sound echoed through the room. A silver tan-haired man walked in, wearing a crisp, old tan school dress uniform. The chaotic circus tan-like room went dead silent. The reporters actually took a step back. The man didn't even glance at the screaming woman, or the flashing lights. He marched straight to my wheelchair, snapped his feet together, and gave me a salute so sharp it could cut glass. Then, he turned, with eyes that had seen the worst of combat. He locked his gaze onto Lily's biological parents. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the kind of heavy authority you don't question. Every single scar on her body, he said, was earned while she was escorting 13 civilians, people just like you, safely out of a war zone. Her name is on a UN peace medal that says she is beyond reproach. If she doesn't have the right to raise this child, then nobody on this planet does. Watching the color completely drain from that woman's face, my mind raced back to how it all started. Years ago, before the wheelchair, I was a captain leading a Hardsan Corps tactical riot squad. Back then, I genuinely believed my shoulders were broad enough to carry any amount of darkness. But life has a twisted way of gutting you right when you feel invincible. It was a frantic, last-minute evacuation in a war-torn city overseas. We were holding open a fragile lifeline for civilians. Right at the tail end of the extraction, an IED went off right next to our bunker without warning. I remember a blinding white flash and a roar that shattered my eardrums. In the split second before the world went black, my instincts took over. I shoved 2 civilians deep into the bomb shelter. The blast wave caught me full on, throwing me like a ragdoll into the collapsing concrete. When I finally woke up, I was in a military hospital halfway across the world. The doctor looked at me with pure pity. My left leg was a mess of shattered bone and shredded nerves. But the real kicker, years of hides and stakes combat, topped off by that final, brutal explosion, had left me with severe PTSD. The day I got the medical discharge papers, I felt like my world had ended. The army was my entire identity, my faith. I'd been eating dirt and dodging bullets since I was 17. I always thought I'd die in uniform, either in the mud or on the training grounds. Instead, I was a broken veteran who needed a cane and a handful of pills, just to stand up. When I first got back to my hometown, I hit absolute rock bottom. Every single night, I'd wake up screaming from nightmares filled with fire and the blood-soaked faces of my friends. My body would shake so violently, I couldn't even hold a glass of water. My neighbors looked at me with this mix of awe and discomfort, the kind of look that cuts away at your dignity, slow and agonizing. Right when I was about to let the darkness swallow me whole, I found Lily. It was a freezing, miserable winter night during a torrential downpour. I was restless, rolling my wheelchair down a dim street near the local orphanage just to clear my head. Then, under an old sycamore tree, I heard a sound. It was faint, like a drowning kitten. I looked closer and found a newborn baby girl, barely a month old, stuffed inside a ragged plastic bag. She was wrapped in nothing but a thin, soaking wet blanket, her skin turning blue from the cold. But what broke my heart was her feet. They were twisted sharply inward. Severe clubfoot. Inside that bag, there was a scrap of paper with her birth date, nothing else. Looking at that tiny defenseless life left to die in the freezing rain, something shifted inside my chest. It felt like a physical ache. There's a psychological concept called post-traumatic growth, where people who have survived terrible trauma feel an overwhelming urge to save something weaker than themselves. It's a way to fight off the suffocating feeling of helplessness. Maybe that's where I was. I pulled her flush against my chest, using whatever body heat I had left to warm her up. When I finally got her to the orphanage, and watched her tiny twisted feet try to kick, I made a decision that made everyone think I'd completely lost my mind. I decided to adopt her. My old squad leaders, my family, even the director of the orphanage, they all tried to talk me out of it. They said, "Emma, you can barely walk, you're living on a disability check, and you're hooked on meds, you're just chaining 2 tragedies together." But I looked into Lily's clear, innocent eyes, and I told them exactly what the military taught me. We don't leave anyone behind. The world threw this kid away. She's my teammate now, and I am not abandoning her. Getting approved to adopt Lily was a bureaucratic nightmare. I had to prove to social services that my mental health was stable on medication, and that I could actually provide for her. During those months, I pushed myself through grueling physical therapy. When the pins tore through my bone and the nerve therapy felt like liquid fire, I didn't shed a single tear. I knew that if I broke, Lily would spend the rest of her childhood in a cold, systemized institution. So, I sold the small house my parents left me and dumped every single penny into a medical fund for her surgeries. 7 years, 2,500 days. To the outside world, we were just a tragic picture, a disabled female vet, and a crippled little girl scraping by. But inside our drafty little apartment, there was nothing but warmth. When Lily had her first major corrective surgery at a year and a half old, she cried through the night from the pain of the heavy plaster casts. I'd hold her for hours, rocking my wheelchair back and forth in the dark, singing old military cadences to her, and honestly, it was like magic. Those loud, booming cadences would quiet her down when nothing else could. To save money for her physical therapy, I rationed my own expensive, imported PTSD meds, and switched to a cheap generic brand with brutal side effects. They made me intensely nauseous, dizzy, and sometimes caused brief, waking flashbacks during the day. But every time I felt like giving up on this broken body of mine, Lily would take a few clumsy, beautiful steps on her healing feet, wrap her chubby little hands around my neck, and whisper, "Mommy." In that one word, all the shrapnel and smoke from my past just melted away. She was saving me, she was pulling me out of the dark, and against all odds, the miracle happened. By the time Lily turned 5, she threw away her orthopedic shoes. She was running and jumping like any other kid. On top of that, she turned out to be an absolute prodigy with a paintbrush. Her eye for color was uncanny. In her paintings, a gray world became vibrant. She even painted a picture of a woman in camouflage. The woman had wings, but her leg was bleeding, and her hands were holding up a massive shining sun. She titled it, "Faye Me Superhero Mom Faye." When Lily turned 7, that painting won the grand prize at the State Youth Art Exhibition. The local news picked up our story. Suddenly, the headlines were filled with things like, "Faith a Miracle Healing," "A Disabled Vet," and "Her Angel Faye." Our cramped living room was overflowing with interview requests and awards. Watching Lily stand proud on that stage, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in a decade. I thought the worst was finally behind us, but human greed is a bottomless pit. When the news went viral, Lily's biological parents saw it. They realized that the baby they threw away like trash because of her clubfoot was now completely cured, a celebrated child prodigy, and on track for thousands of dollars in educational grants from corporate sponsors. Greed makes people act like sharks catching the scent of blood. On a random Sunday morning, our door was practically kicked in. A couple pushed past me into the apartment. They were dressed in expensive clothes but had these aggressive, calculating faces. The woman immediately lunged at Lily, sobbing hysterically and calling her, "my baby." While the man looked around our small apartment with total disgust, I threw myself in front of Lily and demanded to know who the hell they were. The man slapped a copy of a birth certificate and a DNA test on the table. He looked at me with total arrogance and said, "We're her real parents. We only left her at the orphanage because we were broke back then. Now we're doing well, and we have a legal right to take our flesh and blood home to give her a real life." Looking at their self-righteous faces made me physically sick. In family psychology, there's a term for this, opportunistic parenting. They treat children like investments. They run when it's time to pay the price, but crawl back the second there is a payout. I forced my shaking hands flat on the table and told them to get the hell out. "Legally she is my daughter. You have nothing to do with her." The woman dropped the fake crying act instantly. She put her hands on her hips and spat. "Legally, look at yourself. You're a broke cripple, a psycho living on crazy pills. What kind of future can you give her? You're just keeping her here to leech off the donation money. We've already retained the best lawyers in the city. We're taking you to court and stripping you of your rights." They weren't bluffing. Over the next few weeks, they turned my life into a living hell. They launched a smear campaign on social media, hiring internet trolls to post heavily edited videos and photos. They stalked me. They caught a video of my hands shaking while I was picking up my prescriptions at the pharmacy, and took photos of me struggling in my wheelchair. The captions read, "Faye disabled veteran shows severe signs of violence. Is she abusing her adopted child? Faye and Faye mentally unstable woman holding child hostage for donation money." Faye. The internet did what it always does. It turned into a lynch mob. People who knew absolutely nothing about me started leaving death threats on my accounts. Someone even threw red paint on my front door, writing, "Faye gave the kid back to her real parents. Psychos shouldn't be moms." Faye. Lily stopped wanting to go to school because paparazzi were ambushing her at the gates, asking if her mom hid her at home. Watching my vibrant girl retreat back into a shell, crying herself to sleep in the corner of her bed, broke me. I looked at my haggard face in the mirror, looked at my ruined leg, and for the first time, I doubted myself. Faye, am I being selfish? Maybe she really does deserve a normal, wealthy family. Faye. But right when I was ready to throw in the towel, Lily walked over. She pressed her favorite paintbrush into my hand, hugged me tight, and said, "Mom, don't cry. I'm not going anywhere. I only want you. You told me soldiers never run away when things get tough." A shiver went down my spine. She was right. I was a soldier. How could I surrender to a couple of moral extortionists? I didn't engage with them online, in a digital witch hunt. Trying to prove your innocence just feeds the trolls. Instead, I used my military training. I stayed quiet, and I gathered intel. I went to the hospital and pulled 7 years of meticulous medical records. Every surgery, every physical therapy session, every dime I spent out of pocket. It was a bulletproof paper trail of a mother's love. I got written affidavits from Lily's teachers, my neighbors, and the social workers who handled our case. Lily's biological parents mistook my silence for weakness. They filed an emergency petition with the state to revoke my adoption and forced a mandatory preliminary mediation through family services, trying to intimidate me into handing her over before the actual trial, and that brings us back to that suffocating room. When the woman threw my psychiatric file on the table and the reporters started buzzing, General Liu, the man who walked through that door, changed everything. He was the commander who oversaw my final tour overseas. Now retired, he had found out that one of his most decorated veterans was being publicly crucified, and he flew in overnight to back me up. The general marched to the table, pulled out a heavy, classified dossier bearing the seal of the Department of Veterans Affairs, and slammed it down in front of the mediators. He didn't even look at the biological parents. "This is Captain Carter's complete military record and a federal protective order." His voice boomed. "You want to talk about her mental stability? Fine, let's read what the actual experts say." He broke the seal, and turned to a page signed by 3 of the top military psychiatrists in the country. He read it out loud. While Captain Carter suffers from combat SAN-related PTSD, her adoption of this infant has created a profound positive emotional anchor. Her parenting behavior is an exemplary form of psychological resilience. She has demonstrated a level of patience and devotion that far exceeds civilian baselines. The board concludes that removing the child would cause catastrophic psychological harm to both mother and daughter. The general looked up, his eyes burning into the reporters. "You want a story? There's your story. The scars on her arms are from pulling civilians out of fire. She takes medication so she can wake up from nightmares and smile while making her daughter breakfast. She's not unstable. She's a hero." The room went dead silent. The biological mother's voice started to crack. "So what? So she's a hero. She's still a cripple with no money. We run a multi-million-dollar business. We can put her in international schools, buy her a mansion." That's when Linda, the veteran family lawyer I'd hired, quietly stood up. She had a cold, razor-sharp smile on her face, as she slid a thick stack of financial audits across the table. "Mr. and Mrs. Ju, let's talk about your excellent environment," Linda said, her voice dropping to a calm, icy rhythm. "According to the federal tax audits and corporate filings we legally subpoenaed, your multi-million-dollar business was flagged for massive tax evasion 3 months ago. Your corporate accounts are currently frozen by a federal court order. Oh, and Mr. Ju, your passport logs show 3 separate trips to illicit overseas gambling rings. Your personal credit rating is completely toxic." Linda turned to the board, her voice rising. "Furthermore, we worked with the precinct from the night of the abandonment. We recovered the security footage from 7 years ago. The temperature that night was 28 degrees. They left a disabled, 1-month-old infant exposed under a tree for 3 hours. This wasn't financial hardship. This is felony child abandonment. We have already filed formal charges with the district attorney. They aren't leaving here with a child. They're leaving in handcuffs." The man's knees literally gave out. He slid right out of his chair onto the floor, the woman's face completely warped. She lunged toward my wheelchair, screaming, "Emma, we don't want the kid anymore. Drop the charges. Just let us go. We'll pay you. We don't want her." I looked at these 2 empty shells, people who sold their souls for money, and whimpered at the sight of a jail cell. I turned my wheelchair around and walked away. The board ruled on the spot, throwing out their petition and solidifying my adoption once and for all. The night we won, we went back to our quiet, clean little apartment. The general had sent some guys over to scrape the red paint off our door, and a small flag was flying on the porch. After dinner, Lily sat on my lap, her small hands gently tracing the scars on my arm, the ones the media tried to use to call me a monster. She looked up at me with those big soft eyes and asked, "Mom, that mean lady said you were broken. Does it still hurt?" I pulled her into a tight hug, tears finally spilling over, soaking into her hair. I shook my head and whispered, "It used to, Lily, but ever since I found you, it doesn't hurt at all. You're my medicine." Looking back at those 7 tough years, everyone online calls me this incredibly brave, saintly mother who saved a throwaway child. But honestly, it's the exact opposite. On that freezing, rainy winter night, when I was completely shattered by war and ready to give up on life, that tiny crying baby girl was the one who pulled me out of the abyss. Her love gave me a reason to stand up. She healed the shrapnel in my soul. Lily is older now. Her paintings are hanging in actual galleries, and with the help of my old unit, I now spend my time volunteering as a peer counselor for wounded vets with PTSD. Every time I see a soldier drowning in the dark, I show them Lily's painting, and I tell them my story. But it makes you think, if I had been rational on that freezing winter night, if I had worried about my own broken life and kept rolling past that sycamore tree, where would I be today? Would I still be shaking in the dark, swallowed by my own ghosts? And what would have happened to that brilliant little girl? Would her gift have been snuffed out in some cold corner of the world? It makes you wonder, the heaviest burdens life places on our shoulders, are they a punishment, or are they a lifeline wrapped in disguise? If you've ever been saved by a tiny, unexpected grace when you were at your lowest, or if you've ever had to summon that quiet courage to fight back against a world that counted you out, drop a comment below, and tell me your story. What would you have done under that sycamore tree? Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more real, raw stories of the fighters who refuse to back down.